My family mocked my metalwork. Years later, when my brother-in-law's hedge fund collapsed, they tried to take my property to bail him out. I gave them a chance to vent before revealing something that left them speechless. Well done, Reddit. Because I preferred welding over Wall Street, my family treated me like the untalented guy for 25 years. As it happens, they ought to have been more attentive to what I was genuinely creating and quiet. Take out your popcorn and savor it. My name is Jack, and I am a 29-year-old man who owns a bespoke metal fabrication business, which my family claims is the most embarrassing thing a man can do. I was married to a lease under the large oak tree on my grandmother's property 4 years ago. We configured it as we desired. There were hay bales for seating, wildflowers all over the place, and a barbecue pit that filled the space with a wonderful scent. My guys arrived wearing automobile hearts and work boots. Sophie's pals wore sundresses and brought homemade sweets. It was flawless. It was like community duty to my family, as if he had somewhere better to go. Dad pulled up in his Audi and checked his watch every 4 minutes. Mom's sad expression persisted as she looked around, likely calculating in her mind how much we'd saved by not renting a country club. Olivia, my sister, and her husband Julian arrived dressed as though they were to a Forbes gala. The ceremony proceeded smoothly. My best man was my friend Tom. I got a good laugh when Tom pretended to cough and said, "Can we skip to the food part?" During the officiant's "Speak now, or forever hold your peace" part, the speeches followed. Tom was the first to share a story about a steel shelf I had welded in college that almost killed our roommate when it fell. Julian stood up after everyone had finished laughing. The expression on my brother-in-law's face was the same one he gets when he believes he is smarter than everyone else. He had made sure everyone understood that the 5 years that separated us made all the difference. He had attended a business course. He was employed in the financial industry. He didn't make hobby money from metal shops, he made actual money. He began to lift his glass to Jack and Sophie. The crowd trailed after. To be honest, I assumed Olivia was kidding when she informed me about her brother's impending marriage. I assumed that his welding light was the only real relationship he had. His finance friends chuckled. My pals didn't. Then I met Sophie, though. She's really grounded. It sounded to him like he was portraying someone who didn't understand how society operated. It makes sense. He uses metal in his work. In a hardware store, she works with match-made plants. Sophie's hold on my hand tightened. I could see the harshness in her eyes even though she was grinning. Julian had not finished. I can recall the beginning of Olivia and my relationship. Jack would spend hours creating go-karts and other metal crafts, she would tell me. I was monitoring my portfolio and reading about market movements in the interim. Although some of us were destined to create empires, society requires both, don't we? The boardroom fixtures need to be made by someone. He laughed some more. If we hadn't been at a wedding, my friend Chris's muttering would have sparked a brawl. Olivia then got to her feet next to him. With a tone full of faux niceness, she added, "I'm so proud of my little brother for finding someone who appreciates his unique lifestyle. You're really courageous, Sophie, for adopting this whole primitive lifestyle. Although I respect your dedication to simplicity, I could never give up my weekly shopping excursions and spa visits." Dad might as well have been reading from a grocery list when he delivered his speech. He gave what amounted to a speech about how dissatisfied he was in my decisions while standing there in his $1,000 suit, gazing around the setup as if it were physically painful. According to him, Jack has always taken a different route. We hoped the best for him and Sophie. After everyone had left that evening, Sophie and I were the only ones cleaning up. I was standing by the oak tree when she discovered me. "They aren't worth it," she said. "I am aware of what we are constructing here. It's true. It matters. Simply put, they're too preoccupied with keeping score to notice it." She was correct. However, all I could think about as I stood there on what ought to have been the greatest night of my life was how my own family perceived me as the inadequate guy. The unsuccessful person who settled for a basic marriage. I had no idea at the time how foolish that speech would turn out to be. They believed they were aware of my identity. They didn't know. Life had become regular 3 years after the wedding. I worked full-time at the shop, producing specialized metal fabrication that generated enough revenue to keep us from worrying about expenses. I had secured contracts with many commercial builders that required architectural metalwork and custom railings. The work was consistent. My family was unaware that I had been doing experiments. I had been working on something in the back corner of my shop for the previous 5 years, even before I met Sophie. I was hoping to find a technique to molecularly treat steel and aluminum to make them stronger, lighter, and more resistant to corrosion without destroying the environment. My initial motivation was my frustration with exterior metalwork rusting out after a few years. I began reading books and scientific magazines, contacting professors of metallurgy online, and taking tests in my free time. I was able to grasp the technical aspect, because to Sophie's experience with environmental chemistry. When she returned from her work at the conservation center, she would discover me trying to decipher the code while coated in chemical compounds and metal shavings. I finally got it right after 3 years of botched trials and damaged test pieces. The formula was successful. My method made the metal much stronger and essentially impervious to corrosion while maintaining environmental safety. I put it through every test I could think of. Pieces were exposed to stress testing until they failed, salt spray testing, and 2 winters outside. Compared to what I had observed, the metal held up better. I registered for patents 2.5 years ago, but I kept it a secret from everyone until Sophie. There are 4 of them that address various facets of the procedure and important applications. I then started shopping the technology to manufacturers, formed an LLC, and repositioned some assets for legal protection. I gave ForgeTech Solutions a call. Remained silent. I wasn't attempting to conceal it. Simply said, when I was creating something genuine, I didn't want to know what my family thought. Nothing occurred throughout the first year. A regional manufacturer of coatings showed interest in me the second year. I had license deals with 2 reliable businesses by year 2.5, which was roughly 6 months before everything collapsed, and the company was estimated to be worth $4.2 million. The funds from ForgeTech Solutions were in business accounts and were overseen by individuals with knowledge of corporate finance, according to the man who welded railings. Sophie and I continued to live in the same home and drive our old trucks. On the outside, nothing changed. In the meantime, my family was having the time of their lives on social media. Julian left his corporate position to launch his own investment company. He made bold bets when everyone else was being cautious, and he was all in on real estate development and getting in on the next great thing early. Dad spoke of him as if he had created capitalism himself. Olivia had become a full-time influencer and was posting about luxury all the time. Julian, the smart young investor who was upending everything, was her star. She decided that recording their ideal existence online would be her new occupation and quit her job as an event planner as soon as Julian's firm took off. They had purchased this enormous home in a posh area. Olivia wrote about it all the time. Julian had installed the wine store, the home gym, and a special closet for her fancy bags. They invited us to their housewarming celebration. Sophie persuaded me to go, even though I was on the verge of refusing. I made them a coffee table for a week. Tempered glass on top of a custom steel frame. Every one of the artistic-looking welded joints has a matte black powder coating. The piece made me proud. Olivia's smile turned to plastic after just one glance. She put it down in the corner and forgot about it right away, saying, "Oh, thank you so much." They spent the entire evening flaunting themselves. With this condescending tone, Olivia introduced Sophie to her influencer pals while dragging her about like a charity case. "This is Sophie, my sister-in-law." The women would examine Sophie from head to toe, admiring her modest outfit and useful shoes, before turning back to Olivia to discuss the latest Chanel collection. Julian spent the majority of the evening cornering me with his finance buddies. At one point, he patted my shoulder and said, "Good for you, man. Honest work. She works in conservation, is very noble, and lives on almost nothing to save the trees." When we were all in the living room, Julian was talking about some huge deal he had closed, about vision and knowing which investments were dying and which were the future. Olivia was hanging on his arm, practically glowing. "The world needs guys like you. Someone has to make the stuff we put in our offices." "Speaking of old school, how's the metal shop, Jack? Still making mailboxes for the neighbors?" Olivia giggled. "My husband is just so brilliant with money. I honestly don't know how he does it. I just trust him completely, and let him handle everything." She looked at Sophie when she said it, and Julian looked at me. The room fell silent, everyone watched, and I had nothing for about 5 seconds, just that old feeling of being the family joke, before Elisa's voice broke the stillness. "Better than gambling away other people's retirement funds." My cousin Rachel, the only sane member of the family who earned a living as a teacher and avoided the family drama, called on the way home. Mom shot Sophie a look that could have killed her, and Olivia instantly gasped, her hand flying to her chest as if she had been physically struck. Her warning was vague, but it stuck with me. As I drove away from that sterile mansion, I had the impression that Julian wasn't building an empire, but rather that he was building a bomb that was about to explode. That was intense, she said. But between us, be careful. I've been hearing rumors. Julian's making some risky moves. Some of his deals aren't looking so good. Another year went by. At the shop, things were picking up speed. Mom would text, asking why we never visited, conveniently forgetting how the last visit went. We stopped receiving party invites, which was a relief. Holiday calls were shorter and more forced. My family thought I was making decorative gates, but Sophie had quit her conservation job to help me full-time with the technical side of Titan coating. She understood the chemistry better than I did, helped me refine the formulas, and made sure we weren't cutting corners on environmental safety. Forge Tech Solutions had grown from a side project to something receiving serious attention. I had brought on a part-time business manager, a guy named Lucas, who understood licensing agreements and patent law. We were in negotiations with another industrial manufacturer about using my coating process for their production lines. When my phone rang one afternoon in October, Rachel sounded frightened. "Jack, are you alone?" I was in the shop. "Yeah, what's wrong?" "It's Julian, he's in serious trouble, possibly criminal trouble." I turned off my grinder. "What happened?" "I was at your parents' last night. They assumed I was busy, but I could hear them talking to Olivia on the phone." "Jack, Julian lost everything. Not just his money, but his clients' money too. He persuaded many people to invest with him, including your dad's friends, old college friends, and even some of Olivia's relatives. I was horrified to hear the talk of lawsuits and fraud charges. I don't know all the specifics, but he's completely underwater. I thought about all those speeches at parties, all that talk about vision, and knowing winners from losers. He took all their money and made some huge bet that went sideways. The development deal was fake, or the land was contaminated, or something." Rachel's voice trailed off. "Why are you calling me?" "Because they're coming for you. I heard your dad say it clearly. You're the only one with real assets." He was referring to the shop and Grandma's land. "You owe it to the family." The nerve of it hit me like a punch. For years, they had treated my life like a consolation prize and my work like a hobby. I heard Mom's voice calling for Rachel in the background. Now that their golden son-in-law had crashed and burned, all of a sudden, what I had built was valuable. The family's safety net. "He can't be serious. He's completely serious. Mom is a wreck. She keeps saying that Julian made one mistake and the family must stick together. Olivia is apparently having a complete breakdown, and they see you as the only way out." I told Sophie everything that evening while we were sitting on the porch watching the sun set over the property. "They're going to show up here, probably with lawyers, and demand I sell everything to fix Julian's mess," I said. Sophie fell silent for a moment. "I got to go. Just be ready. They're coming soon." I glanced at her when she said, "I think we need to have a conversation before they get here." She made reference to Forge Tech Solutions, the patent portfolio, and the fact that Julian's situation is more complicated than you realize. She took out her phone and opened a file. "Julian has been running a hedge fund for the past 15 months. Did you know that? I thought he did development deals. I've been helping Lucas track the industry, keeping tabs on who's moving in the coatings and material space, who's making plays, and who's betting against emerging technologies. But he's been shorting stocks, betting against businesses he believes will fail." She showed me a financial document on her phone, and I looked at the screen, saw the name of Julian's fund, saw a list of holdings, and there at the top, highlighted in red, was the single largest bet he'd made. A massive short position against my company, Forge Tech Solutions. Julian had bet well over $900,000, including his client's money, that my company would fail. His entire position blew up when Forge Tech Solutions succeeded, and he wrecked himself. "Betting against me," I continued slowly. "He was so sure that his brother-in-law, a plain metal fabricator, couldn't possibly have developed something substantial that he had put everything on my failure." Sophie said, "The universe is funny like that." I sat there thinking, and now he's coming here to demand you sacrifice everything to save him from the consequences. Julian, who had spent years looking down on me, had literally bet his future on me failing and lost. Does he know I own Forge Tech Solutions? I doubt it. We sat in silence, watching the last light go out, and 3 days later, a courier delivered the legal threat to our door. Forge Tech Solutions is registered under my maiden name as the primary contact for privacy, and to him, it's just another overhyped materials tech startup run by people he's never heard of. He has no idea that his brother-in-law's failure destroyed him. I received a letter in a fancy envelope with the logo of a law firm I had never heard of. It stated that, due to the family emergency and my moral duty, I had 1 week to assist in selling my property in order to improve Julian's financial circumstances, after which they would take all necessary legal action to compel a sale. Sophie was already on her phone when she said, "I'm calling our lawyer. We'd retained a guy named Mark 6 months back when Forge Tech Solutions started getting serious. They're threatening to sue you," she said, reading the document, "to force you to sell your own home." "Can they even do that?" she asked. "But they're hoping you don't know that." We met him at his office the following morning and went over everything, including the threatening letter, the family history, and the kicker about Forge Tech Solutions. Mark laughed when we reached the part about Julian shorting my company, but let me make sure I understand. He was an expert in business law and intellectual property, but he also knew his way around property disputes. "They think you're a struggling fabricator who owns some family land," he said. "In actuality, however, your brother-in-law bet against your $7.5 million coating technology business. And he lost everything when your business was successful. In order to help the man who attempted to take advantage of your loss, they now want you to sell the land, which is truly a corporate asset." "Yep." Mark leaned back and grinned while shaking his head. "This is amazing. It's like seeing someone punch themselves in the face and blame you for their broken nose." He clarified that their legal threats were baseless, adding that the land had been moved to the corporate structure of Forge Tech Solutions 2 years prior for liability protection, meaning that even if I wanted to, I couldn't sell it. "What do we do?" I asked. "Nothing. Let them decide what to do next. When that time comes, they won't file a lawsuit because any lawyer worth their license will tell them it's hopeless. They'll come in person, and I want to be there when they do. Any judge would laugh their case out of court in about 25 seconds. I was in the shop setting up a program on my CNC mill when I noticed the 3 cars coming down the long driveway. The deadline came and went. Friday went by without any word, Saturday and Sunday were quiet, and I nearly thought they had given up. However, Monday morning proved me wrong. Dad's Audi, Julian's less impressive-looking BMW, and a third car I didn't recognize. I turned off the machine, went to the house, and saw Sophie at the window. The phone was already out. "They're here. I see them." She hit a button. "Mark, it's time." Short pause. "Perfect. See you soon." She hung up, looked at me. "Our lawyer will be here in 20. Until then, we listen. Let them talk." The cars stopped, and doors opened. Dad got out first, looking 10 years older than I remembered, followed by Mom, whose eyes were red from crying the entire drive, Olivia, who looked ruined, Julian, who had lost weight and had dark circles under his eyes, and a man in a fancy suit carrying a briefcase from the third car, who was most likely their lawyer. We didn't move. "Jack." Dad's voice was strained. "We need to talk. It seems like you drove a long way for a conversation we already had. The situation is critical." He was trying to sound authoritative, but it came out desperate. They didn't knock. Dad simply opened the shop door and walked in like he owned the place. Everyone followed. I was standing by my main workbench, Sophie by my side. He pulled out a folder and dropped it on my workbench, saying, "Everything you need is here. Purchase agreement. We found a developer willing to buy the property, and the money goes straight into escrow to settle Julian's obligations. It's clean, and it saves the family. Julian is facing multiple lawsuits, and criminal charges are being discussed. We need to take immediate action." "Preserves the family? You mean saves him?" I repeated. "Jack, please. He's your brother-in-law. He's family. He made a mistake. But you can't let him go to prison, please. I'm asking you as your sister." Olivia moved closer, and for the first time in years, she wasn't acting superior. Instead, she was pleading. Their lawyer cleared his throat, saying, "Mr. Blake, you have a clear familial obligation here. The precedent for property transfers and family exigencies is well established. He didn't make a mistake, he made a series of awful decisions. Is it?" The lawyer scowled. "The land is deeded to you through your grandmother's estate. The title is clear," I remarked, fascinating, because I understood that you can't sell something you don't own. "Was given to me." Dad's face was flushing. Mom said in a heartbreaking voice, "What are you talking about? Stop playing games. We've already sold our house. It wasn't enough. This land is the only option after everything we've done for you. You owe us this after we reared you. I glanced at Sophie, and she nodded slightly. It was time to put an end to this, and Sophie moved forward. Dad glanced to her, perplexed. What are you talking about? I think there's been a significant misunderstanding, she continued, her voice cool and cutting. You've made several incorrect assumptions. You were mistaken about everything. You looked at us and saw precisely what you wanted to see. A basic fabricator and his wife. Poor, easy to push around. She put her hand on the folder they brought and moved slowly to the workbench. And as a lawyer, I'm sure you understand property law. You can't sell what you don't own. Mrs. Blake, I don't think it's stone. I kept my name. She stared at him straight. The lawyer argued that the deed was in Jack's name, but Sophie clarified that it was in WDE's name. Since Jack is the company's creator and principal owner, the land was officially transferred to Forge Tech Solutions LLC 2 years ago as a corporate asset, and he is very definitely not selling. There was a dead quiet. Their lawyer's expression changed from confident to apprehensive. Mom looked perplexed, and Dad's mouth opened. However, Julian had turned absolutely white, and I could see the wheels moving in his head as he stared at me for the first time in years. Forge Tech Solutions, he murmured. That's correct, I replied. Have you heard of it? No. You're a metal fabricator. I concur. Olivia was glancing between us, mascara streaked. I am also the founder of a coating technology company that is currently valued at over $7.5 million. But you already knew that, didn't you, Julian? Dad looked at Julian and demanded, what is he talking about? Julian, what's going on? I knew this day would arrive, so I went to my workbench, unlocked a drawer, and took out a file that contained financial records, patent applications, and one particularly intriguing quarterly report. I stated, I began working on a chemical coating procedure for metal around 5 years ago. It took me 4 years to figure it out. While you all thought I was building garden gates, I filed patents, established a business, ran it covertly, and created something tangible. This is a financial filing from your hedge fund. Read public record. Shows all your major positions. Want to guess what your biggest bet was? I produced a single document and held it up. He was unable to respond. You shorted Forge Tech Solutions, investing well over $900,000, your client's money, because you were so sure it was a fabricated materials tech fraud that you wagered everything on it failing. I put the paper down, and when it succeeded instead of failing, your entire position collapsed. Dead stillness. You bet against me and lost everything. No, you couldn't have known it was his company. Of course he didn't know, Sophie answered. We registered the company under my maiden name for his privacy. Olivia's legs gave out and she fell to the ground, crying. This isn't feasible. You're lying. Dad finally found his voice. Forge Tech was simply another startup to short. I finished because, in contrast to you, I don't need to flaunt my accomplishments or a mansion to demonstrate my value. You don't have that type of money. You live in this modest rural home. Olivia was crying now, and Julian was trembling. I created a business that adds value rather than merely transferring money. You should have been the one in need of us, therefore this can't be happening. At that moment, another car pulled up outside and our lawyer, Mark, arrived just in time. He walked in, took a quick look at the situation, and smiled. Am I running late? He asked. Perfect timing, Sophie said. He put his briefcase down and took out his own file. Just so you know, I'm Mark, and I work for Forge Tech Solutions and Jack Blake. He glanced at their attorney and said, You're Brian from Preston and Moore, right? I've read the materials your firm sent. Their lawyer gave a feeble nod. All right, then I can tell you straight out that your demand letter has no legal value. He remarked nonchalantly. Any attempt to force a sale would be dismissed immediately, and given the circumstances, I'd probably file a harassment suit on top of it. Additionally, Mark went on, taking out another document. I've investigated Mr. Julian's financial status and found evidence of investor deception in addition to poor judgment in the short position on Forge Tech Solutions. Julian sounded like he had been punched when he told them the short was based on insider information when it was really simply a hunch. Securities fraud. Their attorney was already packing his suitcase and, without saying another word, made his way to the door. I haven't turned this over to the SEC yet, Mark added. I wanted to give you all a chance to walk away quietly first. How could you do this to us? Mom began to cry. Your family is us. Family doesn't make you feel unworthy for 25 years. Get out of my shop, I said, walking to the door. Your family doesn't wager against your success and then demand that you ruin yourself to save them from their own foolishness. At first, none of them moved. Get out of my life. Now, I urged. Olivia was still on the floor, crying, and Julian had to physically pick her up. Dad made one final attempt. Son, you don't understand what you're doing. I guess they couldn't comprehend that I was serious. The result? I stood there feeling something I hadn't felt in 25 years. Freedom. The cars started, then they were gone. The consequences are yours to deal with. They trudged out, looking disheartened. The following few weeks were silent. No irate phone calls, no frantic texts, and Mark kept me informed about Julian's legal status. Julian was buried with lawsuits, with 3 of his biggest investors having launched civil claims. His marriage to Olivia was in ruins. They had moved into a small apartment on the shady side of town. Olivia had deleted all her social media accounts. Dad and Mom had sold their house at a loss and were renting a small condo somewhere. And the SEC had opened an investigation into his trading practices after those lawsuits caught their attention. Dad had returned to his former firm in a consulting role. Most Forge Tech Solutions was taking off, and we'd signed another licensing deal. It was basically a pity job from his ex-partner's mother, who apparently spent most of her days crying and asking why I was doing this to them. In their minds, I was the bad guy, the ungrateful son who had deserted his family when they needed him. I built a proper office space in the barn, hired 2 full-time employees to help manage things, started holding business meetings with people who took me seriously, and the custom fabrication work slowed down. Another company was using our process for automotive parts, and a regional aerospace parts manufacturer wanted to test it for their components. We were creating new applications, filing more patents, and building something that could outlast both of us. We were happy, and the absence of my family's constant criticism made it even better. I kept a few regular clients, worked on projects I wanted to do, but mostly I was focused on Forge Tech Solutions. Sophie was thriving. She had always been good at the chemistry side, and now she was running R&D full-time. About 5 weeks after the altercation, on a Saturday afternoon, I noticed Rachel's sedan pull into the driveway. I went outside to greet her, and she stepped out with a casserole dish in her hand and an anxious expression on her face. "Brought you some lasagna," she said. We sat on the porch and chatted for a bit before she revealed the true reason she had come. "We eat pretty well," I remarked, grinning. "Come on in. I heard your parents are barely holding it together. Dad works all the time, and Mom just sits at home. They don't talk about you, but I know they think about you all the time. Olivia and Julian's marriage is essentially over," she said. "They're staying together for the time being because they can't afford lawyers, but she resents him completely and blames him for everything. And Julian." Rachel remained silent for a while. "Jack, he's broken. Really broken, I mean. He is aware that he wrecked himself because he was too conceited to appreciate what you had created." I said, "Good, and I really did mean it." "They want to apologize," gently replied Rachel. "Eventually, when enough time has passed, they think maybe if they give you space, you'll come around." "I won't." I said, "I know." "They don't believe me," so she got up and said, "I'm not pleading with you to pardon them. I'm not even requesting that you speak with them. I simply wanted you to be aware of their misery. It doesn't matter if you care about that or not. Sincerely," I continued. "I was treated as though I wasn't worthy of their time for 25 years. Sophie was made to feel inadequate for 5 years by them. They arrived with the intention of stealing everything I had created. Their implications won't keep me up at night." "I'm proud of you for what it's worth," Rachel said, nodding and making her way to her car before turning around. "They were challenged by what you created with Forge Tech Solutions. It required courage." "Thanks, Rachel. And if it's all right with you, I'd like to continue seeing you." I said, "You're welcome here anytime," and she smiled in relief before driving away. "I know I'm part of the family that screwed you over, but you're the only one who didn't," I said. "Rachel stopped by," I said as Sophie and I sat on the porch swing that evening. I observed. "How is the family catastrophe progressing?" "As you might anticipate. Julian is ruined. Olivia is a complete mess. Parents are hardly working. They all think I'm going to forgive them eventually." "Are you?" "No, I'm not angry anymore," I said after giving it some thought. "I just finished." My phone buzzed, alerting me to an email. I looked at it and was astounded. What? Sophie inquired. Forge Tech Solutions just got an acquisition offer. Who is it from? The company is called Major Industrial Coatings. Their intention is to buy us out. To make sure I wasn't having hallucinations, I read the amount twice. $20 million. Sophie remained still. 20 million euros? Are you serious? That is crazy. What are you interested in doing? I want to think about it, I said, surveying the property, the house where we had created our lives, the shop where I had welded my first project, and the acreage my grandmother had trusted me with. However, I'm not basing any decisions on their opinions. Their viewpoint is no longer relevant. We sat there for a while, and somewhere they were undoubtedly assuring each other that I would change my mind, that blood was blood, and that family was family. But they were mistaken. 3 months later, I was signing the last documents in a city conference room with attorneys and business people, and we agreed to accept the $20 million acquisition transaction, provided that I remained for 3 years as head of R&D to continue creating new apps. The following day, the money arrived in my account, and I spent a good 5 minutes staring at the figure on my phone, money that would change my life. The first thing I did was pay off the property entirely, with no mortgages, liens, or anything else attached. The land my grandmother left me was mine, free and clear forever. I had made more money than my father had in his whole career, working in a metal shop he had referred to as a hobby. After that, I established a trust to keep it safe, so that no one could touch it, not even Sophie's relatives or creditors. And the second was a donation to the conservation center where she used to work, where they were actually doing something to assist the environment rather than just talking about it. I kept the shop, continued to take on projects I wanted to undertake, and continued to live the same life, but without the strain. After that, investing the majority of it in things that would bring in money without requiring me to think about it. I disregarded most of the messages, which came from distant relatives I hadn't heard from in years and old high school acquaintances who all wanted to get back in touch because they had always believed in me and were so proud of me. My parents didn't get in touch with me, at least not directly, but Rachel informed me that they had heard the news. Mom had been crying for hours. Olivia had spent the entire afternoon locked in the bathroom, and one afternoon I was working on a custom staircase railing in the shop when I heard a car outside with a very expensive engine. I looked up and saw my father's Audi. He had come by himself. I thought about not responding, but I left. Dad was standing by his car, looking wrecked. The last few months had aged him. "Jack," he said, and silence fell between us as he surveyed the property, the shop, and everything he had spent years ignoring. "I made a mistake," he finally said. "Just one of many." I didn't answer. He went on. "I believed I was guiding you towards something greater because I believed I understood what success looked like." He laughed, but it was a bitter laugh. "I thought Julian had it figured out, that Olivia married the right kind of man. I was wrong about everything." "You were, really." "I'm not pleading for your pardon," he declared. "I'm not worthy of it. I wanted to let you know that I can now see it. I'm sorry I didn't notice it sooner, but I can see what you've always been creating." I told him, "I appreciate you saying that. But it doesn't change anything. Dad, you weren't only a mistake maker. You have made me feel unworthy all my life. Each and every time you picked Olivia and Julian over me. At our wedding, you allowed people to make fun of my wife. You came here with the intention of stealing everything I had created to protect him from his own foolishness. I understand. Now that I was successful, you are not entitled to an apology. Now that there's money involved, you can't be proud of me. It doesn't work that way." His face fell apart. "How can I help?" "Nothing. Please don't disturb me ever again. Jack, you need to leave." He stood there for a bit longer, perhaps wanting to say something more, but what was there to say? He got back in his Audi and drove off, and I felt nothing as I watched him go. I had spent 25 years trying to win their favor. I had made something that would outlast all of us, and I had proven everything I needed to prove, not to them, but to myself. My grandmother had left me this land, believing that I would use it for something worthwhile, and she had been right to believe in me. I had chosen my own route, created my own life, played my own game by my own rules, and I had won. I had taken her gift and transformed it into something that no one had anticipated. Something genuine.